Whenever blocks fall to fill out empty spaces, we need obviously to see that happening on the screen. So for example, if all of this is empty, this block needs to be shown falling towards that location. Then there's a variation of that, which is when the blocks are located in the reserve grid, which is not visible for us. So in this lesson, I'll implement methods for one for the main grid and one for the reserve grid that show how that happens. Those methods will be called from board.js. When you actually do those droppings, besides updating the model, it's also going to show the visuals, the corresponding visuals. So let's get started. In game.js, then I'm going to be adding a method called dropBlock, which will receive as parameters, it will receive the source row, that's the starting position, the target row, that's the ending position, and the column. This all happens in the same column, as you know. They're not moving or horizontally. So we need to get this block, this .get block from column row, and the object that we will pass here has a row of source row and a column of col. So this gives us the corresponding sprite. Then the target, but the target y, the coordinate, is 150 plus, and this is coming out from here, is the same thing, but instead of being I, this is the target row. Okay, so that's our target y. Then we also need to update our sprite to the new row. Remember that sprites do keep track of where they're placed. So we update our sprite as well. And then we will use a tween, a block movement tween, which will simply change the y position on the corresponding animation for the corresponding animation time that we've defined for the game. Block movement dot to. So it's moving to y equals target y, and this occurs in animation time. Lastly, we simply have to start it, make it happen. And we have to call this from the actual model itself. So when we finish dropping a block, then we should do this .state.dropBlock and pass in an object with pass in source row, pass in target row, and pass in column. So let's have a go, see how this works. So I'm gonna firstly clear the chains, and now I'm going to, let's click on the game, and now I'm going to update. Oh, I didn't mean to press that, so let's try again. Let's clear the chains, and now let's do it. Update grid. So now, as you can see, we can trigger that manually. Now the same thing for the reserve block, and as you might have thought, as you might think, it's actually going to be implemented similarly. So .reserve block, and now we just need to add that method. So in game.js, we are going to duplicate this code and change its name. And a few things need to be different in here. Firstly, we are actually going to create a new block, because in this case we had blocks there and we just moved it, whereas in this case we are creating a new block. So we're no longer finding a new one, but instead we are using our other method, this.createBlock. And this createBlock method needs x, needs y, and needs the data. So x will be 36 plus column times this dot block size plus 6. So this is the same as before, as we did when we draw the board in the first place. This is we calculate x, and now y is going to be off the screen, up of the screen, so that they actually fall from the sky. So it will be this dot block size plus 6, and then times this dot board dot reserve row, right? How many rows the reserve area has. Reserve row plus source row times this dot block size plus 6. This basically means that it starts according to where the source row is. Remember that the source row here is on the reserve grid, not on the main grid. So now we can actually create our block. And for block, remember that all you need to pass was x, y, and data. So what's going to be data in this case? Data will be asset, and it will be block plus this dot board dot grid target row and column. Remember that in board.js, when we go to drop reserve block, we've already done the update. So the block now is no longer is actually on our grid. So this is the same. This is what I'm accessing in here. I'm accessing that same element, and we also need to pass in the row, which is target row, and the column, which is column. Okay, so this is the same, the target y, that maintains the same, and we don't need to do this because we are creating a new block or reusing a block, and that will be assigned when inside of this method and inside of the of either the creation of the block or the reset method of the block. So lastly, this obviously is the same, and now we can have another try. So I'm going to start clearing all the chains, and now I'm going to do an update, and I have to click here to see it all. So see how now we could actually do it again. So now we could clear new chains, we could click there, and we could update. So let me click on the screen, and again we get the new ones from the reserve. So now we have actually almost everything except for the user input. So now the part that's missing now is our ability to swap different candies. To summarize, I've added 2 new methods that allow the dropping of the blocks. They are called from the model methods, from drop block and drop reserve block, and they don't do any updates in the grid, but they do keep track in the blocks what their rows and what their columns are when they create a block. But they work similarly. A position, initial and ending positions are defined, and then a twin is used to carry out the movement.